Hello, my name is Aviva, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a bunch of small town romance book recommendations. So if you've been here for a while now, you know that I have been in a really big small town romance kick. For some reason, I can't get enough of it. I'm just like in a mood, and I keep reading more and more small town romances. And I kept thinking like, oh, I should probably like push this video off for a while and share with you like all of my recs once I'm done with this feeling. But at the end of the day, like I really don't see it stopping anytime soon. And I already have like too many books to share with you. Like I'm not even going to share with you every single like small town romance book that I've read. So therefore I have chosen a couple of my favorites that are kind of the books that got me into realizing that like I really do love small town romance books. So if you never read a small town romance book before and you wanted to get into it, I think that like all the books I'm going to share with you are a great place to start. But either way, with that said, the first book that I'm going to share with you is All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata, which is so freaking funny because when I read this, I knew that it took place in a little small town in Colorado, but I never really realized that I was reading like a small town romance book. Like I didn't really realize what the trope was at the time, and therefore I read this book and I absolutely loved it. And I didn't even realize that one of the main reasons why I did love this book was because it was taking place in like a small town and it had all of those sorts of like vibes going on with it. But either way, this is a very, very slow burn romance, and you're following a girl that just came out of a very long relationship and she kind of wants to like get to know who she is by herself again. So she decides to like move very far away from like where she was living into like this tiny little town in Colorado, and she rents a place from this guy's like house. Like she rents like the little loft like above his garage or something like that, and she ends up getting really close to the guy that's living there with his son. So like he's a single dad sort of vibes, and either way she's living in this small town. She gets a job at like one of the couple of stores that like are in this tiny town, and you're just gonna follow her kind of realizing who she is by herself. And she's also going to get really close to like the kid that's living on her property, as well as have a very slow burn angsty romance with the really grumpy guy that she's renting from. So either way, great story, absolutely loved it. And it is definitely a small town romance with a single dad, and oh my God, Grumpy Sunshine, just everything about this book, really, really good. Next, I have The Simple Wild by Kay Tucker, which is another book that I read so long ago that I did not realize was like a small town romance book until like after the fact, when I realized like, wait, this book takes place in a small town, and it definitely had all the small town vibes that like I was looking for when I'm now looking for new books to read that have the small town setting. And I just didn't realize that that was one of the big reasons why I loved this book as well. Like I just kind of like read it for what it was at the time. But either way, this book is really, really good. I did talk about it recently in one of the other romance book recommendation videos that I made, which was about like books that kind of like will give you like an emotional tug and like kind of like pull at your heartstrings. And that is because in this book you are following this girl who she is not very close to her father. Her father lives in like a small town in Alaska, and she lives like in like a city in Canada or something. And she basically gets a call one day, and like the girl that like calls her basically says like, oh, your father isn't really doing well, and if you want to get to know him before he unfortunately is going to be passing away, then you should probably come and visit him and spend some time with him. And she's like, you know what, perfect timing in my life, because like I just lost my job, or I just quit my job, something along those lines. So like I'm going to pack up and go and get to know my father. So that's exactly what she does. And she gets on a plane, she goes to this tiny little town that literally like there is nothing there. I don't even think they had Wi-Fi in this town, like really tiny town. And she basically gets to know her father, and she gets to meet the guy next door who also happens to work for her father as a pilot, because the only way to like get things back and forth like in this town is through airplanes. Like there's no taxi services or anything like that, like they're in the middle of the mountains. So it basically is just like a really good setting. It kind of does have this like Grumpy Sunshine feeling as well. And like there's also that whole like emotional tug of like her getting to know her father as he is like, his health is declining, and you can just only imagine where it's going to go. So this book is definitely going to pull out your heartstrings, but it also has like a really, really good romance. And it also has like such a good small town setting, because you're taking this girl who's like used to living in this city. Like she's a social media influencer. Like she's not even just like a regular normal girl. Like no, she is like all about city living and stuff like that. And she is just like dumped into a small town, and she's gonna have to wear like boots, get like used to the mud, like everything along those lines of like just not everything available to her. And it is a very interesting story to see. Like if you're into small town settings, it's a really good setup for that. And another couple of books that I read a very long time ago are all of my R.S. Gray books. So I was in like an R.S. Gray kick, like I don't even know how long, like probably sometime like around the summertime, like maybe like this time last year, maybe like just under a year ago. And either way, I just could not get enough of this author's writing. Like all of her books were so easy to read. I flew through them. They were just like, small town romances, except I didn't realize that like I was enjoying them because they were small town romances. I thought they were just like really easy books at the time, but like that is why I love small town romances, because they're all just like really quick, easy reads. And that is why I've read all of these books by R.S. Gray. There are so many more books to read by her other than these, but like I read all of these, and like while they are like a little bit similar, because like small town romance books, like they've all got the same vibe. So like I kind of read all of these back to back, and then I just like stopped with her. But I really got to get back into more of her work, because like she is a really great small town romance writer. But either way, I have all of these books. They're all different small town romances, different tropes. Like this one is like a friends to lovers. This one is like, a boss worker relationship. This one is an enemies to lovers, like two doctors who have like been enemies since they were like children. They come back, then they're like fighting for like the family practice or something like that. This was a really good one. And then Make Me Bad was a good girl, bad boy sort of setup. And then The Fox and the Hound was this like new guy coming into this small town. Like he's going to be the new vet, and all of the single ladies are kind of like after him, but he kind of only has eyes for like this one girl. And then there's like going to be a little bit of fake dating in this book. And like, this one was a really fun time. But either way, all of these really, really do highly recommend. I loved every single one of them. And yeah, R.S. Gray, good small town romance writer. Next, I have Indigo Ridge by Devney Perry, which is actually the first book that I read where I knew that I was going into it knowing that it was like a small town romance vibe. Like I didn't really realize what like small town romances were until I picked this one up and realized like, oh, I like small town romances, But either way, this is actually also the first book that I read by this author, and I absolutely loved it. I've read a couple of more books by this author already, and this is still my favorite of hers. So in this book, you're basically following this girl who has just become the new sheriff of this small town in Montana. I think it was called Quincy or something like that. But either way, she ends up like going to a bar one night, and she has a one night stand with this guy that she thinks is like passing through. And then the next day, or like the next couple of days, whatever, she basically realizes that the guy was not a tourist, but he is in fact the owner of one of the biggest ranches in this tiny town. And now they're going to have to, see each other all the time, because happens to be a murder just happened in this town on his property. So she's going to have to be around him very often, and they're not going to really be able to stay away from each other. So then they're going to start sleeping together, and then they're going to start falling for each other. At the same time, you're also following this little mystery, trying to figure out who murdered this person. So very interesting story, very much liked it. It wasn't too intense. Like it's still a small town romance. So even though you're following this like murder mystery, like it wasn't crazy at any point. Like there was no like, oh my God factor, which is like, it was an easy mystery, an easy small town romance. Highly recommend this one. I very much love it. And if you do love this one, then there is a second book in this companion series called Juniper Hill. And that is a single parent small town romance where they're working together and also basically living on the same property. Like she's going to end up like, renting his loft, like kind of like All Roads Lead Here. Like she's going to rent the, room above his garage sort of thing. So, either way, if you like this one, Juniper Hill is also a really good read. Next, I have Ignite by Melanie Harlow, which is the sixth book in the Clover Leaf Farms companion series. And this was actually the first book that I read from this series. So you could totally read it out of order if you want, even though I have read a couple of more books from this series, and every one that I have read so far, I have very much enjoyed. But either way, I wanted to specifically share with you this one because this was my favorite that I have read at the current moment, even though I plan to read more from the series eventually. But my point is that this is a single parent small town romance book, and oh my God, was it good, because he was also a firefighter. He was super freaking hot. He was divorced. He had two little girls, and he ends up moving into this new house, and he meets his neighbor who is, I think, 10 years younger than him. So it's an age gap as well. And anyway, they kind of are very much pulled to each other. They're going to end up having this very tensiony, angsty romance, and it's a really, really good time. The kids in this book, so freaking cute. I absolutely loved everything about this. I flew through this one. This is one of those books where it's I just didn't want to put it down. I kept wanting to read it. And it also has a really good groveling moment at the end. So, all around the board, really good book to read. So I highly, highly recommend this one. Another Melanie Harlow book that I wanted to share with you is Drive Me Wild, which is the first book in the Bellamy Creek companion series, which was actually really cool because it had a very small tie-in to the Cloverleaf Farms companion series. That series was just somewhat mentioned in this book. You got to see a couple of characters from that series show up in this book. So I really liked seeing that overlap. But either way, this is totally its own series on itself. It's kind of taking place in this small town that's a couple of hours away from Cloverleaf Farms. But either way, in this book, you're following this girl who is on on her way to Cloverleaf Farms, and she stops in this other small town on her way, and she ends up getting into an accident. And that is when she meets the mechanic of this small town, and he's going to basically help her out, fix out her car, let her stay in his apartment for a while because she has nowhere else to stay. And at the same time, he's also going to give her a job because she has no money to pay off her car. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this book, and it was a really, really good read. I very much liked it. This was a very classic small town romance book though. This was very much very exactly what you would expect from a small town romance. A lot of gossiping neighbors, the mother getting involved, the siblings getting involved, the old guy next door giving out all of this really good advice. Everything about this book screamed small town romance, but it was a really, really good read. I highly recommend it, and I am definitely planning on continuing on with this series because I very much did enjoy it. So I do have book 2. I haven't read it yet, but I plan to read it very soon. And then once I read that one, I'm definitely going to be continuing on with more of this author's work because I am definitely a huge fan. Next, I have Off to the Races by Elsie Silver, which is actually the first book that I read by this author. This was her debut book, and oh my God, was it so cute. I just finished this book the other day, and I am still thinking about it. So this was basically about this guy who he has his family owns a lot of different companies, and one of his companies, which happens to be a horse racing ranch, is now in scandal. They kind of the media found out that his grandfather, who just passed away, was rigging races. So now he basically decided to take over the ranch and kind of fix up their reputation, everything along those lines. And the first thing that he decides to do is hire this girl who is going to be their new horse trainer or whatever. And her first task is basically going to be dealing with their most problematic horse because they kind of the boss and this new horse trainer they meet and they don't get along right off the bat. So it's a very interesting setup for a story. I really liked the horse racing ranch vibe going on. I think that I might have fallen in love with the horse in this book more than I actually fell in love with the romance, but I loved the romance too because it was very angsty, very guy falls first. There was a groveling moment in it. I really liked their tension and all of their banter. It was everything about it. It was a really, really solid small town romance read, and I am definitely planning on continuing on with this series because there was a little glimpse of the next couple that's going to be in the second book, and I am so ready to see what is up with them. So yeah, highly recommend this one, a recent favorite of mine. And then I have 3 more books that I wanted to share with you that I wanted to specifically point out that I did not love as much as I loved all of the other books that I shared with you in this video. But I know that everybody has different tastes. Everybody's looking for something else. And I know that a lot of people very much did enjoy these books. So I'm mentioning them anyway. So with that said, first up, I have Come Back For Me by Corinne Michael. So this is the first book in her Arrowwood Brothers companion series. And I would definitely recommend looking up some trigger warnings for this book because there's stuff like alcoholism and physical abuse and stuff along those lines. But either way, this is a second chance romance, and I am personally not a second chance romance fan, and that is one of the big reasons why I didn't love this book. But if you like second chance romances, you'll probably like this book. So this is a single mom, a small town romance. This girl, she was being abused in her current relationship, and this guy basically comes back into her life. They had a one-night stand years ago and never saw each other again, and now they kind of meet again, and he is the guy that is going to help her kind of be saved from her crazy abusive husband. So yeah, either way, very good book, a small town romance. So much more going on in this book than what I mentioned, but either way, if you're into second chance romances and you like the small town single mom sort of vibe, I recommend looking more into this book because I think that you will very much enjoy it if you like all of those type of stuff. I also wanted to share with you Be Still My Heart by Emily McIntyre and Sav R. Miller. So this is a small town romance with a murder mystery. You're following this girl who is either an FBI agent or a profiler or something along those lines. But either way, she gets this new case to try and find out who is killing all of these people on this little tiny fisherman island of sorts. So she basically goes to this island and she meets the guy who had found the latest body, and they very much don't get along right away, even though they're attracted to each other right off the bat. And either way, it's going to be their romance, and they're both going to work together to try and find out who is killing all of these people. So this book had a lot of twists and turns, not only in the mystery aspect, but also in the romance aspect. So I didn't absolutely love this book, very 3 stars. A lot of it didn't work for me, but also at the same time, it was a pretty solid murder mystery. So I mean, you can give it a shot if it sounds super up your alley, but if you don't end up liking it, I already said, I didn't love it either, but it was a fine read, but either way, yeah, this is that. And then the last book I wanted to share with you is Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. So this book has been, hyped up for a while now on TikTok and Instagram. I see it all over the place that people are raving about about it. And it wasn't a bad book, but again, it wasn't my favorite either. So in this book, you're basically following this girl who is more or less a new single mom. She ends up like taking over guardianship for her twin sister's daughter, so like her niece that she never really knew she had, and she's gonna end up moving next door to this guy that like basically just keeps wanting to get involved in their lives. Like he's going to give her a job, he's going to give her a place to stay. It's kind of like a Grumpy Sunshine situation in this small town, and basically it's got a lot of really good solid tropes going on. Like if you like small town, if you like Grumpy Sunshine, if you like, I think there was maybe a little bit of an age gap, but I could be wrong about that. But either way, they're working together, they're living next door to each other, and this guy, while he doesn't want a relationship, he seriously cannot stop getting involved in their life. So lots of good small town romance vibes going on in this. There's a bit of a mystery, a bit of like a twist and a turn at the end of this book, but it was a little bit longer than I thought it needed to be. And either way, not a bad book, but again, not my favorite, but it's still, I think, worth the read if it's like really calling out to you and like Instagram and TikTok is really making you want to check it out. So either way, that is all I wanted to share with you today. So with that said, let me know if you have any good small town romance recs for me. Like I said, I am always down for some good small town romances. So leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you plan to check out any of the books that I mentioned in this video. And either way, with that said, give this video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're not subscribed, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And until next time, enjoy reading.